Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you and see you.
Yes? No?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. I can hear. Can you
I
hear
can't
me?
hear you.
Oh, I don't know.
Mm.
Hi, am I
Hello?
speaking with Serena?
Yeah, who is this?
Yeah, hi Serena. Very good afternoon. This is Farhan. I'm calling in regards to an inquiry that you made for the Data Science and Artificial Intelligence program.
Can you hear me? Test, test. Can you hear me? Talk. Hello, hello. Loud.
Hi, Alice.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, so I am the problem now because I can't hear anyone.
Oh no,
So
I can
that's
hear you.
weird. Uh, Let me see what could be the issue. Um, Let me leave the studio and come back.
Okay.
Hi.
Oh, can you hear
Okay,
me
now I
now?
can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Good.
Okay, awesome. Uh, let's see. Can you hear Akil, are you saying something? You're muted. No. Hmm. Um, Mm-mm. Uh-oh. Okay. Let's see. I think I have to add everyone to the stage.
I think if you add people to the stage, then it all shows up, and then folks, like
What was that?
right now I'm seeing everybody up and on the
On the
screen.
stage?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I should remove them, right?
I think you just want us if we're the only people talking.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Hopefully folks can hear us.
Okay. Let's give it like another minute or two
Yeah.
before we start. I just hope that everyone can hear me. I'm not sure. It's my first time using Stream.
Yeah,
so,
I can hear you. So something's working right.
yeah. Okay.
Cool.
All right. I'll be right back. Hold on.
You're on mute.
Okay. Perfect.
Now you're good. Yeah.
Awesome. So audio is coming through. It looks like everyone can hear us. If not, can you please say in the chat you can't hear? Can you please say yes, we can hear you, or no, we cannot hear you on the chat? Okay, so audio is coming. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. I'm glad. I was really nervous. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so. But I'm really glad that this is working, and it's my first time using StreamYard. This is the very first edition of my series, Tech Careers of the Future. I thought starting with trust and safety was a good call because there's so much going on in the world of trust and safety. There's Meta's changes with content moderation. They're moving their teams to Austin. They're getting rid of content moderation, which I worked with that algorithm that moderated content at Meta some years ago. There's the DEI rollback, which is related to it, but not really. Today's the inauguration. There's so much, and TikTok went off, it went dark, and now it's back, and we don't know what's going to happen to it. So there's so many changes happening, and I think it's perfect timing to talk to you, Alice. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for accepting my random invitation, but I just thought, there are so many questions on people's minds right now. They want to know what on earth is going on. What is going to happen?
Any of us know.
Yeah, and I just set some expectations. I went ahead and told everyone that you were going to answer some questions, but let me just level set with everyone. Alice may or may not have all the answers. She doesn't have a crystal ball, so just keep an open mind and ask questions. But none of us know what's going to happen, right? So I think we should start. I think people are, they're waiting to hear from you, Alice, and hopefully I'll do justice to having you here. So I think we should just jump in. What do you think?
Perfect. Sounds good.
Awesome. So I want to ask you, well, first of all, I want to ask you, for those unfamiliar with trust and safety, I'm pretty sure everybody here knows what it is, but I just want you to explain in like, maybe like 2 or 3 lines. What does trust and safety mean in tech? And what is it that you do? What does a VP in trust and safety at Partner Hero, what do you do?
Okay. So trust and safety is the strategy and execution of that strategy for keeping people safe online. And if you want to expand it a little bit, that also includes brand safety. So not only keeping users safe, but also keeping the reputation of the company safe, making it so that advertisers want to advertise, so that users want to come, sort of basically ensuring that the platform's not completely taken over by bad stuff. That's a sort of summary of it. So when people think about trust and safety, they often think about the big platforms like Meta or TikTok. I haven't worked at any of those companies in my career. There's a whole range of different places that trust and safety can be used. Right now, I am on the vendor side, so I run operations teams. So social media companies hire us to enforce their policy through moderators across the world who speak a bunch of different languages, have cultural context in a bunch of areas. And that can be really hard for platforms to hire somebody in, every country with every kind of expertise. And so companies like Partner Hero can do that for them. Previously, I worked heading up trust and safety and customer support for dating apps for about 13, 14 years. So I was at Grindr and then previously OkCupid. So I spent a long time on the platform side and then just the past year on the vendor side.
Okay, awesome. I do want to ask you about your career path. I know that you probably did not study trust and safety in college, right? And I want to ask
nobody had ever heard of it. It wasn't even a thing. Yeah.
And this is, each question has a goal, right? So what I want is for people to see that you probably don't, like, especially for people in college right now, what you're studying in college is not what you're going to do like 10 years, 20 years from now. So can you tell us like what you studied in college, and then even when you were working in the small companies in, the more well-known ones like Grindr, what was your title? Like, how did it evolve since you were first hired to where you are right now?
Okay. So I'm 41, just to give people some context for how long ago I was in college. So I graduated 20 years ago. And the internet was a very different place then. So when I was in college, I thought that I wanted to study political science, economics. I was, really interested in social justice and making the world a better place. Realized that was going to be way too frustrating for me working with like the government. Props to you, Sarvel, for trying to do good from the inside, but I know that it's really hard, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. So I ended up getting a film degree, and I was an editor for documentary films in New York for quite a few years. And during the time that I was in college and editing these films, I founded a little online message board. Had a couple thousand people. If you were into like a very niche kind of punk rock music, then you would know what it was. But doing this community forum, I realized you need community guidelines, you need enforcement, you need to be able to keep people off the platform who are causing trouble. So I got this sort of crash course in online safety at a pretty small scale. And then in 2009, after I'd been a documentary editor for a while, the economy crashed. There was a recession. No one was making documentaries anymore. And it seemed like a career, it was very, I just didn't think it was for me. So I was trying to figure out what else I wanted to do. And I ended up getting a job as a frontline content moderator for OkCupid, a little tiny dating app at the time. There were 20 employees. I was friends with one of the founders. I was as qualified as anybody to moderate because I had been moderating this forum. And you have to remember, this was like when I started this online forums before Facebook existed, before MySpace existed, before Twitter existed, before like anything. There's, early days of the social internet. So I sort of learned how all of these things worked along with everybody else. So yeah, I just started moderating content, and it was mostly scammers, like romance scammers. And just like looking at profiles and being like, yes, this is a scammer. No, this is not. And I was fascinated working at a tech company. I loved it. I loved working at a startup. I loved how fast paced it was and how quickly technology was changing and how quickly social norms around online dating were changing. Because like when I started there, it was taboo. Like nobody talked about finding love online. That was like, people were like, what do you mean you like work for a dating app? What is that? And then also, what do you mean you're a moderator? Like nobody had heard of that job before. And like compare that to today, where literally everybody meets the love of their life on a dating app, and all of the world leaders are talking about content moderation right now. It's like such a different world. So I just kept like raising my hand and saying, hey, what else do you have for me? What else can I do? At the time, engineers were answering customer support emails, which went about as well as you could imagine. Is not their specialty. So I was the first customer support representative and answered customer support emails. And through that, any really serious customer complaints came through the email system. And so even though I wasn't moderating anymore, I was handling all of the like very serious in-person assault claims, for example. I'm working with the legal department. So I always had a foot in trust and safety, even though some of what I was doing was support. So I went from customer support rep to manager when I had a couple people under me when the site grew. Then I became director of customer support. Then they asked me to oversee content moderation and customer support and the like in-person reporting that I was handling. So then I was like director of customer experience, which was, all of those things. Then when I moved to Grindr, I was senior director of customer experience, also handling customer support and trust and safety. Then I became VP of customer experience. And then now I'm VP of trust and safety. So that's sort of my career path, is just like working my way up, taking on more responsibility and sort of raising my hand and saying, hey, I can do that. And yeah, took time, took 15 years.
Yeah. So now that we have an understanding of your career path and who you are and what you do, I want us to like dive right into this. People are here because they want to hear about the future of the industry, and the challenges that AI poses to their jobs and also the opportunities. So I'm just going to start like asking you like questions, like what are like, how do you see trust and safety as a career evolving with the rise of AIs, large language models, meaning ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and all these new technologies? Like, tell us, like, what do you think? Where do you see this field of tech heading?
So trust and safety has been using AI for years and years and years and years. It's one of the fields that has embraced AI. It's traditionally been machine learning, not generative AI, but still using automation at scale. Pretty much every platform does it. And so, there's some jobs, like the very first job that I had at OkCupid, where you're frontline moderator and you're just doing really easy stuff. Some of that is going to go away, but most of it has already been automated away at this point, and we're seeing more bad content because of AI. And so probably that AI generated content will also be removed by AI. But I think as an industry, we came to terms a long time ago with the fact that you always will need a combination of people and AI to moderate content. So you can't automate all of it because humans are really messy and complicated. There are new emerging events that happen all the time that the AI isn't trained on, that only humans will be able to recognize. There's new slang, there's, new gangs, there's new world events that everybody's talking about. None of those things can be moderated by an AI if the AI doesn't know what they are yet. So there's going to be a room for people, absolutely. And it's going to be a kind of side-by-side relationship, I think, where the easy things and the things in bulk that are repeatable get automated, and then the people kind of fill in all of the gaps. I'm excited about the possibilities of generative AI and use for trust and safety. We're starting to see some companies experiment with using it as a way of explaining reasons, or being like a co-pilot to moderators, or generating, suggestions to users about what they should say and what they shouldn't say. So I think there's some very cool possibilities, but we're not seeing a lot of companies embrace those things yet. So I think there's going to be some innovation in the next few years, and it'll be really cool to see that. So yeah, if you're, looking for your first job in trust and safety, and you're I wouldn't get a job as a frontline moderator and feel like that's going to be a safe job forever, but there's going to be a lot of upskilling, and all of the outsourcing companies like the one that I work for, we're all thinking about how can we get jobs for our people that are the next level up, and how can we help them to have the skills to be able to really influence what the AI is doing, instead of just have their jobs be displaced completely.
Yeah. So it's speaking of upskilling, what do you think are evergreen skills that people have, right, that they should keep? And what do you think are some evolving skills, emerging skills that trust and safety workers should start learning so that they can transition into this emerging fields, right? Like moderating, instead of moderating social media platforms, they moderate LLMs, or they moderate other things. What are those evergreen versus evolving skills?
So I was just talking about this. I had a meeting with VP of trust and safety at a major social platform that you have all heard of. We just had a coffee chat the other day. And he was saying to me how the further along that he gets in his career, and he had a similar career path to me, the more he realizes that operations, trust and safety operations, is a lot more complicated than people think. And it's something that's kind of hard to teach, and you either get it or you don't. And a lot of us who have been in the field for 15, 20 years, we had to kind of figure it out on the fly. And now I have a lot of people ask this exact question, which is what are the skills that you need? And, it's easier said than done, I think. Some of them are very kind of fuzzy, soft skills, which are really underappreciated in tech companies, where most of the employees are I got an engineering degree and I know these programming languages and these are the skills that you need. In trust and safety, the ability to have a balance between intuition, which has like meaning behind it. So pattern recognition, being able to sort large amounts of information, see, what's happening. Maybe you can't exactly explain why something looks suspicious or sketchy to you, but because you've seen enough of it and your brain can kind of filter it, then your intuition tells you this is bad. So you need to be able to have that sense and be able to listen to it. And I think that's similar skills that like law enforcement have, or social workers, or there's doctors even, being able to just kind of see and like, oh, this thing looks wrong, and then being able to sort of dig in and find what exactly it is. So you can't only work on intuition, you also have to be able to say, okay, what part of the policy is this? What are the gray areas that haven't been met yet? If I make a decision and either decision that I make is going to have downsides, which is the worst downside? So being able to do these like risk assessments on the fly. So I think a combination of being able to be really analytical and rules driven, and also kind of intuitive and understanding humans, which is a pretty tricky combination. And then like hard skills, if you want to actually like learn something and study something instead of just like have the right personality. SQL is always something that's really, really helpful for trust and safety folks to have, because a lot of investigation work, which is the work that humans can do, involves running through data, pulling queries, digging through. So folks who have SQL skills is always really helpful. And then now I would say prompt engineering and kind of understanding how generative AI works and how LLMs kind of think or operate, because that our enemies, the bad guys trying to do harm on the social web, they understand all of those things really, really well. And so if you're working on any kind of system that is going to be using LLMs for good, then you need to be able to think like a bad guy and think about all of the ways that things can be broken before they actually are. So those are sort of some, I don't know if that's like really helpful, because it's like you can't really study trust and safety at school. And the reason you can't really study trust and safety at school, like there's a couple programs, there's a few graduate programs, but there's no undergrad for it. And the reason why is because it is like such a undefinable field. You can see me sort of struggling, trying to explain like how are the ways that we have to think, and it's a process of being intellectually curious and rigorous, which is a skill that you can learn and develop. And I think a lot of people would argue like kids these days aren't rigorous in the same way that they used to be. I don't think that's true. I think you just have to have that sort of curious mindset to begin with. So
yeah, and I think to add to that, there was a whole bunch of former diplomats that joined companies like Meta and Google and Twitter back in like from 2019 to 2021, 2022, because of their geopolitical knowledge, right? Their adaptability and their ability to diplomatically like talk to different functions of the company. So talking to being part of operations and talking to the policy folks, and also talking to product and talking to the business side of it. Yeah, because trust and safety is considered a cost center, right? So it doesn't bring in any money. And some people hate it because it's like, we're spending money and we're not making it back. But it's more like an insurance, right? Think of it as insurance.
Yeah.
So for example, you mentioned earlier, like events that happen that you really can't predict. So who could have predicted that the person who committed this terrorist attacks in New Orleans, who would have thought that he was going to rent a car from Turo, Turo is like a rental car sharing company. Think of it as like Airbnb for rental cars. And they weren't expecting this to happen, right? So there's a very fine line between being this small company and you think you're not doing anything that needs trust and safety, that needs that kind of insurance, and then this happens to you, and then you're in crisis mode and you're in crisis management mode. And I see the on LinkedIn, I see the job posting right away, like, we're hiring for a trust and safety, or we're hiring for a privacy consultant. And I'm like, you just want to have a fall person. You just want to have a fall person for a few minutes until this dies down. So it's a very interesting balance to see how companies respond to this kind of things. So I just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, I like thinking about trust and safety as diplomacy. I think that there's a lot of connections there, both internally within the company. Absolutely. I would say the number one thing that has gotten me sort of far in my career is becoming really, really good friends with people in every single department of the company and figuring out how can I make their lives easier and how can I help them be successful in their goals with what my team does. And, if you sort of enable other people to be successful, then you can be successful with your team. And trust and safety is very much like, we're never going to have the spotlight. If we do have the spotlight, it's for really bad reasons. Like if you're doing your job well as a trust and safety leader, nobody ever hears of you. Nobody ever talks about you. Nobody ever sees what you're doing. Like success is nothing happening. And that's really hard to justify a budget for, because people would be like, well, nothing's happening. What do we need to spend all this money for? And so you have to be able to justify other things that you can kind of help other folks with as well. So, if there is anybody here who's working in trust and safety, like, if you have company quarterly get-togethers, like go have a drink with the people on the security team and the people on the engineering team and become like good friends with them. And, with the privacy folks, like privacy and safety are actually trying to accomplish the same goals, even though we do it from different sides. So become friends with the privacy team, become best friends with the product folks, become friends with the marketing folks. Like really, truly, if you're not being completely cross-functional, then it's like a big missed opportunity.
Yeah, it's definitely like insurance, right? Like health insurance or home insurance, right? You think nothing is ever going to happen to your house until something happens to your house. Yeah, but I do want to transition into like the real core question that I've been wanting to ask. There's actually two core questions that I wanted to, three core. Can you talk about the overlap between trust and safety and AI ethics, AI governance, and responsible AI? Because I feel like trust and safety was the hot thing like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and now responsible AI is that, and AI ethics is that hot thing. So can you talk a little bit about the overlap between the two? And I'll add my thoughts as well, but definitely want to hear.
Yeah, I want to know what you think. I'm actually really surprised there aren't more trust and safety people who are, forefront in the AI ethics world, because there's so much overlap. I think a lot of the AI ethics work is like maybe a little bit more academic and theoretical, and there actually are people who've been studying those things. And so, that cohort maybe looks a little bit different. They're basically both designing systems that are set up to enable safe, trustworthy, good outcomes. And for trust and safety folks, you're trying to set up systems that help humans interact in a way that is not going to be terrible. And, you know, in the AI world, it's setting up systems for AI to interact with other AI or interact with people or, you know, some combination in a way that mitigates risk and isn't terrible. And so both of them are these kinds of systems thinking, architect kinds of fields where, you know, one is human and one is not, but the same, like, what are our values? What are the outcomes that we want? What are the ways, what are the guardrails that we can put in to make sure that people kind of stay, or system, you know, AI stays within the lines of what is acceptable? How can we think ahead to how that might be exploited? All of those things are exactly the same with both. What do you think? You're muted though.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when we think of AI governance, it's basically what are our values, right? Like, what are the things that we are willing to accept? What are the things that we're not willing to accept, right? So, for example, in content moderation, are we willing to, you know, like right now, right? Are we willing to err on the side of free speech or protecting marginalized groups and not letting certain things be, you know, platformed, right? So I think it's the same in the AI ethics part. Like, how much how much hallucination, how much of a hallucination are we willing to accept from this AI before we launch this LLM out into the world? Like, what do we prioritize the safety of people versus, you know, having a wider platform, having reaching out to more people? So yeah, definitely, I think it there's a lot of overlap there. And, you know, that gets me to my next question, which is, what actual, you know, if you have any, what practical advice will you give to trust and safety workers who want to transition to AI? Like, imagine, you know, you're hiring, right? And you're hiring for someone who you want to work on the AI part of your company. Like, what skills will you be looking for? What advice will you give? Or if someone in your company wants to transition to, let's say, you know, like OpenAI or Anthropic, like, what advice would you give them in terms of like how to put themselves out there?
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice because I don't work for those companies. I did some freelance work for OpenAI, red teaming, Chat GPT before it was, you know, had the big wide public release that got everybody excited. So I've technically worked for an AI company, but it was freelance and it was just like a few hours on the side testing things. So you know, I don't know for sure what those companies are looking for when they're hiring. I would say that focusing on the way of thinking systematically about risk and then finding ways to mitigate that risk are really important. And, you know, those companies absolutely need people who have done it before. And the only people in the world who have done that kind of thing before are trust and safety people. Like, we have built those systems, we've written those policies, we've enforced them with millions of people, which is like a lot of different variables with their own minds and, you know, way of making decisions. And so AI in some ways seems more containable than that. So if you do have experience with trust and safety, I would just really lean into thinking about the structures, and the ways of thinking about that, as opposed to like individual tasks.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is like, I think this goes back to skills. One skill that I think is going to be more in demand, especially as there are more AI companies and more companies using AI, is the ability to write really, really clear policy that AI can understand. Um, so I'm a big policy nerd. Specifically, I'm talking about like community guidelines, not
Mhm.
policy like public policy working with governments. So
Mhm.
community guidelines, when some people, they're written often by legal departments, and they're often written in terms of do not do this, don't do this other thing, don't do this third thing. This is bad. And if you're writing for humans, they really want to know, like, what are the values? What is the point behind this? Why are you talking to me like a criminal? And why don't you tell me what you do want me to do and not just what you don't want me to do? And there's often a lot of kind of legalese language in community guidelines that if you're college educated and English is your first language and you're reading it, then maybe it would make sense to you. But if you're, a teenager reading at a lower level, like half of that might just sort of go over your head and you might not get the precision that the guidelines are supposed to be about. And likewise, if you feed those kinds of community guidelines into AI systems, the AI reads them really badly too and comes up with its own interpretations. And so the way that you write policies for AI are incredibly, incredibly precise. Like you have to define every single word. So if you say, um, this is no hate speech allowed, then you say, okay, the definition of hate speech is you cannot use hateful language against a protected class. Protected class means this number of people. Hateful language means, this amount of things. Like there's so many subcategories, and you really have to define it in a precise way that most people get really uncomfortable with, honestly. So I think that's a skill that not very many people know how to do today and is going to be needed more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to agree with that. I hate legalese. I hate it. And so I think writing really comprehensive and comprehensible policy frameworks are, it's a good skill to have. And someone asked, this a similar question besides SQL, right? SQL.
Mhm.
Someone who doesn't have hard skills, like what other what other skills can they bring to the table? And this is an answer for them. Like if you could learn SQL, great, right? But if you don't want to, if you want to stick to what you know and what you're good at, I would say, like you said, Alice, being able to lead cross-functionally and influence without authority, which sounds very fuzzy, but it's really hard. It's really hard
It
to
is
get
hard.
an engineer to listen to you when you're nobody.
Mhm.
So I think that's where communication skills come in and influencing
Mhm.
skills. And then writing is so powerful. Like, and I'm so bummed that we're losing that skill now that we have LLMs. But still, like, use LLMs to help you write
Mhm.
strong, powerful statements. I would also say, like, I think one thing where people get stuck is escalation. Like instead of sometimes like there's a lot of content that's either good or bad. Like you said this, that's bad, you're banned. And you said this is okay. But then there's like this gray area content that South Bend is not necessarily like, it doesn't violate the community guidelines. And so I think having that, judgment, right? And systematizing that judgment, like, okay, so it doesn't really violate our community guidelines. So what do we do about it? So having that, escalation policies and decision trees, I think that's a good thing. Plus, risk assessment, like if you've done any risk assessment, like that's awesome. But for people who are like earlier in their careers, I think if you can get to like some kind of SQL, if you can get to like, study, like take a course in, AI or like machine learning or neural networks, I think you would be smart to do something like that. I really think that if I could go back to college, and if I were back in college, that's what I would do. But yeah. So let me move on to the next question, which is related to it. So I want to ask you, I think you're in a good position to answer this. Of course, this is all guests, right? But, the platforms that you work for earlier in your career, like this obscure OkCupid platforms that were kind of taboo, right? What do you think are the platforms of the future? Like, like I know Reddit is out there. I actually, whenever I want a true answer from Google, I'm like, how do I do this? Reddit, because I love Reddit. But I'm using Reddit like in the last year or two. Like I haven't used it in a while, like before. I can't do Discord. I cannot do Discord. It's too much. But what do you think are those platforms that people should be looking out for, and where their opportunities are going to come from for trust and safety people?
So you mentioned two that I also always mention. I think what we are learning, and I've been saying this for a very long time, but I think that, the mask is starting to come off a little bit now. It is impossible for large global platforms to truly be neutral. They say, we're town square, we're here for everybody. It's not possible. So like one of the questions that was in the chat is like, how does trust and safety find a line between free speech, letting people say what they want, and not making an unsafe place for other people to be? Everybody's going to draw the line in a slightly different way. And where you draw that line is a statement of your values. And it's a statement of like what you as a company believe in. And that's, given the polarized nature of society these days, there's not a way to make a declarative statement of your values and not have it rub some people the wrong way or not drive some people away. And so I think the platforms that are going to be successful and be able to sort of navigate the next few years are the ones that have clear guidelines that are kind of a baseline for everybody, and then allow users to self-select into their own groups. And so Discord does that, Reddit does that, Blue Sky has community moderation that you can opt into if you want to. And so I think companies like that are kind of, allowing people to get involved and to feel like they are part of the platform, and they are part of the governance of the platform, and have their own choices about how they want their communities to be. I think those are the ones to look out for. Now, there are problems with that as well, because it is giving volunteers the burden of doing what is a professional job. It is not giving
Yes,
people,
that was
like,
my next
volunteer
question.
moderators on Reddit deal with awful stuff, or, you know, any platform, not just Reddit, but like they deal with really difficult things. They need mental health support, just like us professional, you know, trust and safety workers do. So I still, you know, I don't think that these models are necessarily, you know, always the best for everybody. It's like, again, a really difficult kind of balance. Then, you know, I also really like the platforms that are really trying to make trust and safety like a part of their identity. Personally, I think those are the ones that are going to succeed more. So like Pinterest is one where they take a pretty solid stance on moderating content. And then, you know, you can also look to some of the platforms that are like, there's speech, but it is around like professional norms, like LinkedIn, for example, or dating apps that are, you know, people coming together, or gaming, like things that have niche needs, and people kind of understand the social norms of interacting in that way. So I think we're going to see a bit of a pushback on these like big everything for everybody, talk about whatever kind of platforms, and the ones that are able to be at a slightly more human scale are the ones that, you know, I'm excited about seeing where they go. Especially like Blue Sky's been really fun to watch lately as well.
Yeah, so that, you know, that was my I guess it's like a chicken and egg kind of thing, right? Because I guess I want to ask you, like, okay, so should people give up on trust and safety and just transition to something else now before it's too late? Or should they be, you know, like, what should they be doing? Because, like you said, a lot of this up and coming platforms are moving to community nodes, right? To community moderation. They give the, you know, they have volunteers instead of paid people that they
Well,
should.
they have paid
But
as well. They have both.
but not at the same scale, right? Like as the big ones. And then you have problems. There's always going to be someone doing something stupid, right? And then they want to hire them back. And so people are in this like, should I stay or should I go? What is your what are your thoughts? Like, do you recommend to a young person, 19, 20, going to college, trying to decide what to do? Do you recommend like pursuing trust and safety?
Honestly, I don't know. It's a really hard field. You have to be really resilient in order to stay in it long term, both in terms of the content that you deal with and the things that you see that stick with you forever and are the worst of what humanity has to offer. But also, it is really difficult working inside companies that don't always value the work that you do. And there are a lot of trade-offs that, you know, people have to make. So for example, for me, LGBTQ rights is incredibly important to me. I have made a very deliberate choice in my career to only work for companies that are completely outspoken about the importance of DEI and the importance of the queer community, especially. And I will continue to do that, but that means, you know, by me being this outspoken and by sort of saying like, I need to have shared values with the companies that I work for, it really limits the pool of companies that I can go to. And so I have, you know, when you're working in trust and safety, like you are putting values into action. You know, you are taking the company's guidelines and you are making them happen. And so if you don't believe in them, then that can be really bad for your own mental health. As well as for the world potentially. So it's, you know, it's a really hard field, but if you can find those places where you feel like you are actually actively helping people. You are, creating safety for the communities that you care about. You're making the world a better place. All of those things, like, it's so incredibly rewarding. And people who stay in it for a long time are very mission driven and very, feel a lot of satisfaction from doing that work. So I don't know that I would recommend it to like every college kid, because it's not an easy path by any means, but it is one that is really rewarding and can be really rewarding, and the field's not going away. So you see a lot of these layoffs from these really giant companies, and the pendulum swings in various directions depending. But I think one thing that folks have to remember is, like, the number of people working in trust and safety today, even after all of these devastating layoffs in the industry over the last few years, is still more than we had 6-8 years ago. And so, we grew exponentially, then we went back down a little bit, we'll grow again, we'll go back down, it's sort of the way of things. And so it's not that these jobs are going away forever, or that they don't exist anymore. They just might not be at the scale that they were a few years ago, but certainly, like, so much more opportunity today than when I started 15 years ago. So yeah, don't be too discouraged if you feel like your passion is there.
Yeah. But it's also like a trick question, right? Because we could say the same thing about computer science, right? We could say that the exact same thing, like, should people stop studying computer science and just flee to something else? We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So it's all about your passion, and also, like, I think all of us, whether we're going into trust and safety or not, we have to be adaptable and flexible in this new economy, because some jobs are going to go away and they're going to turn into something else, and they're going to evolve, and they're going to be called something else, but you're going to use some of the same skills plus maybe new skills. Like, it's definitely, it's hard to say, but it's also hard to say that about a lot of other professions. So I do want to allow people to ask questions if they want to.
A lot in the comments.
Yeah, we've had quite a few. If anybody wants to come on stage and ask any questions, I'm happy to bring you on stage. Or if you'd rather stick to the chat, let me know. But before I keep asking Alice questions, I want to give others the opportunity to ask questions too.
So you just pick a couple from some comments.
Let's see.
There's a good one I can answer quickly. Saying, are there internships in trust and safety? No, there aren't. I'm sorry. There should be. Very, very, very rarely I see them, but it is not a thing the same way that it is in computer science and other fields. It's just not. So yeah, unfortunately, don't waste a ton of time trying to find internships, because it's not really a thing.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, and this is something that I wanted to ask as well. There, for Richard, right? Your question about internships. So nobody's going to give you an internship on trust and safety, but there are adjacent like functions that are trust and safety related. So, for example, cybersecurity and fraud investigations. Like, I've seen a lot of jobs and sometimes internships in at Uber, for example. Uber hires a lot of this because they have a huge platform where there's going to be investigations and there's going to be fraud. And I think that's a way that you can enter the field, and then you can talk that up to the trust and safety field. I think also, like, child protection, like online child protection, it's part of trust and safety, but sometimes it can sit in like different areas of the company, and it's a very important part of the company, and that is not going away. That is not going away. Child safety it's here to stay. For example, Roblox, YouTube. That's a very, I mean, they can fire all the trust and safety workers, but the child safety people are not going anywhere. So those are
Yeah, I
two areas.
mean, I think
Yeah, go
that's
ahead.
I think that's an important thing to say is like terrorism, child safety, fraud, scams, bots, and sort of large scale attacks and sales of illegal goods, including sex work, drugs, things like that. All of those will remain forever. Like that always has to get removed. Then there's another layer on top of that that some people say is optional. I don't think it is. But then that's things like hate speech, moderation, and some other sort of areas. But there's always going to be this base layer that is just like things that are illegal in every country. Like you cannot allow them anywhere in the world. They all have to, they're very serious, very serious repercussions. So that work is going to remain for sure. It's also the hardest emotionally to work on, like child safety work. It's so difficult.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have only 5 minutes left, so this is the time to ask a question if you want. But I just want to kind of summarize some of the things that we have discussed here, Alice. And trust and safety is a very exciting and I would say fun. It's fun field, right? But it's also, it can take a mental toll on you, right? On your mental health. It's not growing. Like let's not lie. Like it's not growing, but it's also not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere because you have new problems, right? New global problems popping up, and you have things that we haven't even thought of that people could do, right? So nobody thought, like, for example, that someone was going to kill 50 people in New Zealand and live stream it to Facebook. Nobody thought that. Nobody ever thought that, right? So I think those people that say that there's going to be a $1 billion one person AI company, they're not really thinking well, because you're always going to need someone who responds to crisis, who is the adult in the room, who brings rules. So it's a very weird time for trust and safety. It's very uncertain. The future of it is very uncertain. And companies change all the time, right? Like they change directions all the time. So it's a weird time, but it's not going anywhere. And if you're already in it, your skills are valuable and you can transfer those skills to the careers of the future. I don't know what the career of the future will be in terms of your skills in trust and safety, but they will be needed, right? AI is coming up, and AI is putting a lot of AI generated content that is just flooding our platforms. So we're gonna need the skills, like this writing and policy writing skills, like they're going to be needed. And some of the skills that you can really pursue right now are SQL, stakeholder management. I know it sounds really soft, but it's not. Communication skills are always in demand, and writing skills. So anything you'd like to add? Any conclusions you'd like to end with, Alice?
I would just say, I agree with everything you said about we don't know what the future is going to hold. Remain flexible. One of the really fun things about working in trust and safety and tech industry in general is that things do move really quickly, and it's never the same. There's always a different challenge and something else coming up that you're like, oh my God, what is it this week? So, you know, if you want something that is sort of steady and boring, this is not it. But if you thrive on emergencies and pressure, and then, you know, give it a shot. And, you know, I would also say, like, reach out to folks and, you know, ask them. The trust and safety industry as a whole is like really, really friendly and really supportive. We all, you know, those of us who've been around for a while, we all want to help mentor the next generation coming up. So don't be shy. That said, don't ask people like what they did 20 years ago, because it is like what I did 20 years ago has nothing to do with where the industry is at today. If you do exactly what I did, like, it won't work. You have to try something new now. And, you know, ask people like really specific questions, and, you know, you'll be surprised. Like, you'll get a lot of answers if you're kind of like specific and targeted about what you want to learn more about. And, you know, there's some really good like communities and things on Slack, and lots of folks who like to chat on LinkedIn. So don't be a stranger. Say hi to me if you have questions. And yeah, good luck to everybody out there who's trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. I know it's really, really difficult. And, you know, I often am also trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. So it doesn't end, even when you're in your 40s.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Alice, so much for being my first guest. I am, you know, doing this for not just for trust and safety, but for other careers, tech careers of the future. And they're going to be live streaming on YouTube from now on. So please subscribe. And thank you for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.